This week in Texas, we talk about tax cuts, cutting the government's size, and their impacts here in Southeast Texas. You'll hear from Senator John Cornyn and from a policy expert in Austin who explains why Texas is on the verge of an affordable housing crisis. Plus, our political insiders give us their perspectives on the race to fill the seat in the 18th Congressional District. This week in Texas. Hello again, I'm Tom Abrams. Thanks for being with us. We begin this week in Texas with taxes. The 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act faces reauthorization this year, as key elements of it could expire, including the increased standard deduction, the child tax credit, and a lower corporate tax. Senator John Cornyn was in Houston this week to meet with small business owners and push for that extension.
When you go into a retail store, you want to see some very good full peg hooks of merchandise.
At a generational hardware store on Westheimer, several small business owners talked about how they've used the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act as a tool for their respective businesses and what they think would happen if Congress does not extend key elements that expire at the end of the year.
You either earn less or the alternative is you have to lower expense.
Cornyn, the senior senator from Texas and a Republican, wants to extend the cuts, which he says are not for the wealthy, as some critics have alleged.
This benefits people in all tax brackets.
But with inflation pecking away at profits and an uncertain economic climate in the early days of a new White House administration, we asked Cornyn about how the president's tariffs impact these same businesses.
Tariffs are, in part a little bit unpredictable because some of them are not economic related.
He and the others here think it's too early to know what the long-term impact of tariffs against Mexico, Canada, China, and parts of Europe might have, but they're not ready to say they're an issue.
We're going to have to kind of wait and see how these things hash out. Part of the problem is we've sort of grown accustomed to other countries treating us differently than we treat them.
What they can see now is that the 2017 Tax Act helped them. They want it extended. If that happens, Congress will have to find the money somewhere. Government estimates are that it could cost north of $600 billion over the next decade. If Congress decides to extend the cuts, it'll have to find the money somewhere. Congressional estimates are that it will cost $684 billion over the next 10 years. Some of the money could come from the cuts the Trump administration is making through its newly created DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, under which the administration is cutting thousands of federal jobs across nearly every agency in the federal government. That includes those at the National Weather Service here in Southeast Texas, and among those who've left is Jeff Evans, who spent decades working as a meteorologist for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Here's Elise Smith with his story.
You're always balancing your personal life with the professional life. We are kind of the forgotten first responders.
As a government employee, Jeff Evans spent 3 decades protecting communities from severe weather through his forecasts and research. Most recently, he served as the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service here in Houston, the highest-ranking position at a local weather service office.
Around 2010.
Last week, we invited him to ABC 13 to celebrate his career.
So, yeah, 15 years at SPC.
And learn more about the tough, sudden decision to leave a job he loves so soon.
Lost a lot of sleep. Was very anxious about it.
Jeff took the offer of early retirement given to federal employees from the new administration. So while his last day as a federal employee was last Thursday, he is still getting paid through the end of September. His leave is separate to that of the mass firings that also occurred late last week, where hundreds of additional employees within NOAA were let go.
You feel torn because you love the mission, and you also don't want to leave the staff, especially in such uncertain times. But then you have to balance your own career and your own life and where you're at.
Within the coming weeks, you'll probably hear of more forecasters and meteorologists leaving the National Weather Service, the Hurricane Center, Storm Prediction Center. Is there a concern for public safety knowing that all of these different institutions issue watches, warnings, life-saving information?
Yeah, it's tough to answer. We'll have to see how many people leave when a lot of this comes out with the early retirements and stuff. But no, we know what our core mission is, and so as a Houston Galveston office, we are short-staffed right now, but we are going to circle the wagons and make sure those warnings go out and make sure those aviation forecasts are done and are good and accurate.
And even as Jeff moves on from his career, he's leaving a legacy of compassion passion for the work, as predicting the weather could be easier than predicting the fate of his former coworkers.
I think as a federal employee, a lot of folks are more in survival mode. They don't know what's coming. You get into our field because you love what you do. And so that's what I keep saying, tune out the noise, focus on our mission. Our mission's not going away anytime soon.
Let's stick with government cuts and discuss their impacts here in Southeast Texas. I'm joined by political strategist Jessica Colon, Otis Evagaru. A lot of these cuts coming into government, some would allege, are to be able to cut taxes. We know that the federal government is trying to extend the 2017 tax cuts. Your thoughts about how important they are to small businesses and individuals?
Well, we've seen these tax cuts be successful before. It's one of the key reasons President Trump won re-election, was because people remember the prosperity that was there during Trump 1.0, and they wanted it back, and they re-elected him in overwhelming numbers nationally with the national popular vote, and of course in the 7 swing states, and sent him back to the White House to do just this. So this is why the Republican Congress is determined to get one big, beautiful bill and pass these tax cuts to extend them and keep them in place and bring back that prosperity. I mean, President Trump is all about growing this economy, and you can't do that without having these tax cuts in place and empowering the taxpayer and keeping more money in their pocket so that they can invest it back into the economy. So this is a main reason why President Trump was reelected, was to keep these tax cuts around.
Otis, one of the criticisms of these tax cuts is that they're for the wealthy, but they do help the regular individual with the child tax credit and by doubling the standard deduction.
I'm glad you talked about the child tax credit, because that's a Biden tax credit that he should take advantage of. Listen, President Trump is only interested in one thing: growing the pockets of large corporations and the wealthy. That's a top 0.001%. These tax cuts weren't as successful as people try to make them out to be. Low-income families and middle-class income families either stayed there or lost money out of their pockets. And it's been estimated that if this tax cut continues, the federal government is going to lose $3.6 trillion in tax revenue over the last decade. We have to be careful what we wish for. Just because it sounds nice doesn't mean it's going to be nice.
It was nice. And that is why President Trump was reelected, was to keep these tax cuts around. And we cannot forget that President Biden had a carve-out for the 1%, the most wealthy of taxpayers. He had a carve-out, and President Trump did instill major child tax credits during his first administration. And that is one of the key things that we want to keep around here in Trump 2.0 with the extension of these tax cuts.
So when you look at these tax cuts, and then you also look at the fact that the government is cutting employees through the Department of Government Efficiency, are all of those cuts within the federal departments just to be able to pay for the billions of dollars that this tax cut would continue to cost down the road?
They're related, but they're also, we're cutting waste, fraud, and abuse that has existed in this federal government for over 50 years. And we're seeing that. You're seeing some of the most ridiculous things that our taxpayer dollars have gone to. You're seeing the indoctrination globally that our taxpayer dollars have gone to fund, not exporting democracy and freedom, but indoctrinating on cultural policies that most Americans don't agree with. We have seen our taxpayer dollars fund that all over this world. So we're cutting the waste, fraud, and abuse that has existed. Federal buildings have been empty for a long time. There are better ways, more efficient ways we can run this government. And that is what DOGE is about. It was a main reason why President Trump was elected, and he got to task on it immediately.
Otis, about 30 seconds, your thoughts?
Yeah, all I'm seeing from DOGE is Elon Musk getting more and more government contracts as these cuts are happening in different departments. That's what you're seeing happening. Also, is waste, fraud, and abuse Medicaid, since they federally froze it, is it also getting rid of a Ebola task force that's supposed to keep us safe from potentially getting into another pandemic? So we've got to be careful about how we talk about these things. And again, this tax cut did not help low-income families or middle-class families. Those families will tell you President Trump didn't get elected because people were talking about tax cuts. He got elected because he promised Americans that prices would be lower, and right now they're not.
I just want to clarify. President Trump has said multiple times that they are not cutting Medicaid with DOGE
They did
and the
it.
tax.
They did it.
Waste, fraud, and abuse is totally different. And President Biden has said previously,
they did it.
President Biden said when he was in office previously that you have to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, not the benefit.
They did it. And
President Trump is not cutting Medicaid with these tax cuts.
And
He's not doing it.
injunct the stop.
I would love to listen to you all talk over one another for an indefinite period of time. We do have to get to a break. When we come back, a conversation about housing affordability here in Texas. Housing affordability in Texas is nearing a crisis. That's according to policy experts in Austin, pushing for changes that would make housing more accessible for more Texans. There are a handful of bills in Austin that would tackle the issue with innovative ideas. And to learn more about the problem with potential solutions, we sat down with Emily Brizolara Dove. She's a policy analyst with the nonpartisan think tank 2036. Is there a housing crisis in Texas?
I think we're approaching one. Since the pandemic 5 years ago, housing prices in Texas have gone up by roughly 40%. It's not a crisis that's limited to the big cities. It's all across the state. Where I lived for a couple years in Waco, home prices have soared up there by over 50%. So we're getting really, really close to a time period where young Texas families will be unable to purchase a home. And we know that homeownership is really foundational to the financial success of most American families. And it's also just a really big psychological component of the American dream. We know that most people, when asked what the American dream is, cite homeownership more than anything else, more than having kids, more than going to college. So it's a hugely important issue, and I'm really pleased that the legislature has shifted to prioritize that this session.
Texas has long been known as a place of affordability when it comes to housing, but that is changing rapidly. Why?
Fundamentally, we have a lack of supply. We have built the lowest number of houses in the decade following the 2008 financial crisis than we have in any other decade. And we've got this incredible demand. This is in many ways, a good problem to have. Texas is absolutely flourishing. Our economy is flourishing. When businesses come here, they cite the opportunity for their employees to own homes as one of the reasons for doing so. And we just have not been able to keep up with that demand.
And so what has to change?
We, at 2036, we like to say that we've just got to build more of everything. So right now, we've got to focus on land use. So the way our land use rules are kind of set up now is they incentivize two types of building. They incentivize the traditional single-family home on a big lot, like most of us grew up in. And they incentivize really, really massive apartment complexes. There is a whole lot of housing in between those two that it's difficult to build. And so we want to free up some of that land use so that we can build all of that stuff that's in the middle.
In Houston in particular, and I was discussing this with your colleague, we've seen a marked increase in the number of multi-story, high-density townhomes and condos. Is that the model that the rest of the state should or could follow to ease the crisis?
Maybe. The Houston townhome is a really great example of what the market produces when it's allowed to comprehensively respond to demand. So as you are well aware, the city of Houston lowered its minimum lot size to about 1,400 square feet, and they've expanded where that small lot ability takes place over the years. And so in response to that, thousands and thousands of those Houston tall, skinny townhomes have been built. And they're being built at a price point that's a lot more affordable than some of your more traditional big lot single family homes. So it kind of depends what the market demands in different cities.
So what kind of legislation needs to pass to enable it? Is it regulation? Is that the primary focus, or is there something else?
Yeah, there are a ton of great housing bills that have already been filed this session to address some of that land use reform. Several bills to allow for the construction of accessory dwelling units by right. Those are those casitas or mother-in-law units that you might see in the backyard of a regular single-family home. There's a great bill that has been filed by Senator Middleton, SD11 in Galveston, to allow churches to build housing on their underutilized land, which is a model that is picking up steam across the country. Another bill that I'm particularly excited about has been filed by Senator Hughes, and that addresses something that that's referred to as the valid petition. That's something that gives neighbors in an area a really a high amount of control over development projects. It requires zoning projects to go get approved by a really high percentage of city council members. And so that law has been on the books for about 100 years. And so there are a few bills out there that look at reforming that so that we can kind of ease those administrative pathways to building more housing.
So can it be fixed anytime soon? Or is it an issue that will continue to worsen before it gets better?
I think that we have a huge opportunity to make changes this session, and that we will see the immediate effects of.
When we come back, we'll talk about the race to replace the late Congressman Sylvester Turner. Stay with us. Texas's Congressional District 18 has seen 2 representatives die within the last year. First, longtime Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee passed away from cancer. Then earlier this month, her successor and former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner died suddenly in Washington. Already, several candidates have announced their intent to run for the seat, among them Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee, who sat down with ABC 13's Brianna Connor.
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Sylvester Turner were dear friends of mine. They were mentors. But what I admired about them the most was that they fought every day for the people of the 18th Congressional District. They understood selfless service, and that fighting for the folks in the district who may not have the money to give you campaign donations or aren't big businessmen, but just everyday folks, they prioritize that, and I think I share that same spirit with them. Last time that there were opportunities to potentially run, I just wasn't in a place. You know, I have a very young family. I believe my youngest son was about 3 months old at the time. It just didn't make sense. But I think I've always known that the fight for the soul of this country over the past couple of years has been happening in Washington, D.C. We've seen the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration have real impacts on people, on their pocketbooks, and on their quality of life. I'm looking to take the fight to D.C. because that's where the fight is happening right now.
I'm curious as well, and speaking last with Congressman Turner, when he decided to run, the late congressman, he said D18 needed some stability and some experience, someone to kind of bridge the gap between what would then become a future class of leaders, younger leaders. I'm curious how you see yourself. Do you see yourself as being able to bring some stability with the experience that you have, or do you see someone, yourself as someone taking those reins from an older, more experienced generation?
I see myself as both. When I was elected in 2020, I was at 32 years of age. I was the youngest person ever elected Harris County Attorney. And now I'm 36, so I'm still very young, but I have a ton of experience. When I ran for county attorney, I had been working in private practice as a commercial litigator for about 8 years, representing large companies in expensive lawsuits whenever they sue each other, interacting with Fortune 500 companies and CEOs on a daily basis. And since I run for this office, I took over the county attorney's office in 2021. This is an office of 300 people, many lawyers, some of whom have been practicing law longer than I've been alive. So I've had the benefit of being able to serve alongside these folks, of guiding them, and we've taken on real fights and delivered real results. I think that experience is going to be unique to Congress. It's not often you see folks who have worked in the private sector and been an executive in the public sector, but I'm confident that that leadership skills and that varied experience is going to help me in Congress.
You mentioned that historic run back in 2020 when you were able to win the Harris County Attorney's Office. I'm curious how you look at some of the work that you've been able to do in that position. We're talking fighting against polluters. You took on Jewel and won, fighting for people in these cancer clusters, scammers. How do you think about what you've been able to accomplish for Harris County versus the opportunity to accomplish some things for people in a small slice of Houston in D18?
What I learned as the Harris County attorney is that it's not just about having cosmetic fights, right? It's not just fighting for the sake of fighting or for getting likes on social media. It's about taking up fights to deliver real results. And that's exactly what we've done since I've been in office. We took on Juul and big tobacco companies when they peddled vaping to our kids deceptively to get them hooked on it, and we got a $27 million settlement. We took on Volkswagen when they deceived emissions testing and continued to pollute our air, and we got a multi-million-dollar settlement. We've taken on the state of Texas when they tried to proliferate these concrete batch plants in black and brown underserved communities across the county and also including in the 18th congressional district, and we forced them to change their permitting practices. My approach is very much, it's not just about being a fighter, it's about being an effective fighter. People who are just struggling to get by, they want their leaders not just to say I'll fight, they want them to fight and they want them to win. And that's exactly what we've done in this office. I will take that experience to Washington, D.C. and make sure that when we're taking the fight to Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the huge rightward shift we've seen in the Republican Party, that we're going to win some of those fights.
That's where I wanted to go next, because, you know, going from fighting for the largest county in Texas to Washington, no pit stop in Austin, there can be certainly some challenges there, especially when you consider the state of the Democratic Party in Washington. How do you think the experience that you have can translate to D.C.?
I'm a quick learner, and when I do something, I dive all into it. When I won the primary for Harris County Attorney, that was in March of 2020. A week later, we saw a global pandemic hit and the entire world shut down. I didn't go sit on the couch and just wait for my general election. I started reading and learning about how to transform a governmental office. I had never managed more than 4 or 5 people when I took over this office, and since then, I've been able to manage over 300 folks, and morale is up. The folks love working in the office, and it's become a place where people are proud to be. I will dive in with that same enthusiasm in Congress.
For more on what may be a crowded race, let's bring back our political strategist, Jessica Colon at Otis Evagaro. Your thoughts on what this means for local politics, given the number of people involved?
Look, a congressional seat at any time it opens up is just a jewel of a race. And so in a scenario like this, in a special election, everybody's going to think they've got a shot at it, you know, and what base can they bring in to this to try to make it into a runoff. So it's going to be a crowded field. I would not be surprised if this race gets up to 20 people in it, and then the top 2 vote getters would go to a runoff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Jessica. You know, at this time, we don't know when the special election is going to be called. It's going to be a crowded field. You know, losing both icons in less than a year of each other is just devastating for the people of Congressional District 18. And my heart goes out to Ashley Turner and that family, the Turner family, but also the Lee family as well, too, because you lose someone that held the seat that your mom held. It's going to open up wounds within less than a year. So I'm thinking about them. In terms of the race, you're just going to see a lot of people get in. I mean, you're going to have the now former Harris County attorney, Christian Menefee is already out there. Isaiah Martin, Amanda Edwards is going to be in. I think Jolanda is still seriously considering it. I don't think she's made a formal announcement yet. We'll see how that goes. You know, the legislative session is going to be upon us, so her focus is going to be there. But it's going to be a crowded field. It's going to be some of the usual names that you normally see in Congressional District 18 that continually run for offices there. So it's going to be a fun-spirited debate. And like Jessica said, probably someone won't come out. I'd be a little surprised if someone came out just first out the gate and without a runoff. So anticipating a runoff and just waiting to see when the governor calls it.
Now, do you expect the governor to call this maybe for May, or does he wait until November or pick some other date?
I think it'll be somewhere in between. I think that feels November is pretty far away for this seat not to have representation, but then an election takes a long time also. So I could see sometime over the next, sometime in the summer. It seems reasonable to get people, their campaigns ramped up and give, in a similar scenario to what we had last year, have someone fill that unexpired term and then let the primary set in for the 26 election. So, you know, the Republicans are going to throw in too. You never know; it could catch lightning in a bottle. So you can't count that out.
There is a Republican in the race.
There is, and you know there might be more. When you look at and I think it's interesting with this seat too because Congresswoman Jackson Lee held this for so long. And Congressman Turner was a clear icon also in the Democrat politics and party that you're really looking in the next generation of leadership in the Democrat Party to come into this seat and fight for it. And so, you know, when you look at state representatives that are getting in, everybody kind of has a slice of the pie, and you just never know if sometime, you know, a Republican just go over the top. It's very, very unlikely, but you just never know what can happen in these special elections. So.
Well, speaking of Republicans, I really do hope that Governor Abbott doesn't play politics with this. The people of Congressional District 18 deserve to have representation in D.C., particularly because they've lost 2 representatives in less than a year of each other. It's really, really important. And to Jessica's point, you're seeing a generational shift happening in the Democratic Party, and you're seeing it happen right here in Texas.
Thank you both. We appreciate it. This Week in Texas, we'll be right back. Thanks so much for joining us. That does it for This Week in Texas. You can watch our previous episodes on demand wherever you stream ABC 13 on our website, abc13.com. For all of us here, have a great week and be kind to one another.